Now I'm going to show you how to make a basic cake. You can use this for pound cakes and sponge cakes, and basically it's all about showing you how to work with your mixer and how to stagger the ingredients to make the perfect cake texture. So what we're going to be working with is we're going to have some of our butter and our sugar first, and then we'll be adding our eggs, and we'll finish everything off with our dairy and our flour. So we're going to take some of our softened butter. You can either allow this just to come up to room temperature naturally. If you've diced it up, it'll usually take about 20 to 30 minutes. You can also speed up the process in a microwave. I tend to stick to around 30% for about 20 to 30 second increments. Just be really careful because you don't want it to be too softened and sloppy. So we're going to add that in to our mixer. Get rid of all of that excess, and we're going to place our sugar in at the same time. Okay, we'll move those, and we're just going to switch on our mixer. And initially we want it on a very low speed, so I'm just going to use the number 1 setting just until everything combines. Okay, so now it's all mixed together. I'm just going to take the bowl and just scrape around the edges, and particularly the bottom, because there's always a little bit of leftover sugar down there. Okay, place it on again, and now we're going to beat it for about 1.5 minutes on a level 5 or so about the middle. Okay, so that's looking pretty perfect now. It's got some light airiness to it, it's quite fluffy. So I'm going to do one more scrape around. And it's time to add our eggs. So when we add our eggs, we're just going to be doing them one at a time. I haven't pre-beat them or anything like that. We're just going to put one in and then give a little stir. And so now we're going to scrape down the sides. Get rid of all of that because otherwise it will drip everywhere now. Okay. Just give it a nice stir. Okay. Now this is the time that we would also add in any essences or extracts or even any alcohol that you wanted to add into the recipe. Do this now before we start adding our dairy and our flour. Now our next step is to work with our flour, our baking powder and our salt. So I'll put our flour into the sieve, and now we're going to be adding 2 teaspoons of baking powder. When you're adding baking powder, you do want to make sure you do it with the sieve because it does have some little chunks in it. And a touch of salt. Okay, so we're just going to sieve that. Push it around with your hands. It's the time in the recipe to get messy. Okay. Alright, so we're just going to give that a nice stir around, and that is set to go. Now when we go to put everything in, I like to use a bit of a scoop if you've got it. You can use say a 1/2 cup or a 1/3 of a cup container as well, but I just really like the scoop going into the mixer. So we're going to bring this over, and we have our milk and some light sour cream. Now, the key step with this is not to overmix it. We want to add it in 3 parts for the flour and 2 parts for our dairy, but what a lot of people tend to do is they'll wait until, say, their flour dissolves completely, and they'll keep beating and beating and beating before they make the switch to the next ingredient. The key thing is just to get it in there, and then as soon as it starts going around, keep it at a low speed and start adding your next step straight away. So we'll add in about a cup of our flour. And then some of our milk. Okay, so you can see how fast that's happening. If you're not ready for the next step, just stop this. You don't want to overbeat it. It will aerate it too much. You'll end up with a cake that rises quite well and then will want to drop on you. So we'll do our next lot. Okay, so if we take a look at it, it's not completely combined yet, that's all right. What we want to do is make sure that we give it a really good scrape. We want to get any excess flour. The dairy tends to combine really well, but the flour tends to sort of congregate either at the top or right at the very bottom. So we're just going to give it a nice stir and just make sure that we scrape that bottom and fold it over. I find a spatula is best for this. A wooden spoon gets a little bit tricky and it doesn't get everything off the base. Okay, now if you're working with a citrus, it's a good idea to put your rind in now. It's always the final step and you can just fold that in with your spatula. Okay. So now we're going to place it into our cake pan. I've got an 8-inch round. This recipe is perfect for this size and it will make a nice tall cake. So we're just going to pop that all in, just pressing it down. Okay. Now, when you're doing cakes, you want them to have about 1 centimetre or ½ an inch off the top. You don't want it to be too tall for each cake. If you need it to be any taller, you just want to go ahead and make 2 instead. Okay, so we've got this now. Now we're going to go ahead and wrap the cake pan in the way that we talk about in the prepping cakes and cake pans, and it'll be ready to go into the oven. Usually cake recipes like this are about 165 to maybe 175 degrees Celsius, and of course we can convert that into our Fahrenheit. So now that this cake is out of the oven, we've allowed it to cool for a little bit. A tester that we use is just a wooden skewer inserted into the cake right when you think you've finished baking, and you just want it to come out really clean. If it's got any little fuzzy bits of cake, that's fine, but no moisture. Now, we're going to take the sides off first of our parchment paper. And then we're going to flip it over onto our wire rack and just let the top release. If it wants to get stuck anywhere, you can give it a bit of a tap around, but if you've done your paper really well, you'll be absolutely fine. Now we're going to peel this back. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is just wrapping up our cake. We're going to take some of our Glad wrap, and this will just help to protect it and make it nice and airtight while it's cooling in the fridge. We tend to leave ours in the fridge for at least 6 hours, preferably overnight if you can, and then it'll be all ready to go.